So I think we'll get started. I'd just like to welcome everyone to the first of the Spectrum Scale User Group's digital events. So I'm Simon Thompson. I'm the chair of the user group in the UK. For obvious reasons, this year we've been able to run a number of the kind of in-person events that we've run this year. So we've been working with other members of the user group and IBM to work out how we could do a digital series. So if you don't know about the user group, we are an independent set of users who run the group. We do work closely with IBM. There's an email and a Slack community. That isn't a replacement for PMR, so or raising tickets with IBM. Although there's lots of people in the community who will help answer a whole bunch of other questions in there. There's been quite a lot of chat on the Slack group in the last day or two about things like CES and SMB integration and how different sites are doing that. So I do encourage you to go and look at those different communities if you're looking for sort of community-based help. So the user group, who are we? So I'm Simon Thompson. I'm based in the UK. Christy and Bob are both on the call today as panelists on this. They're based in the US. There's also Bill, who couldn't make today, and Chris, who's in Australia. So Chris is also looking at trying to run some events which are more suited to the kind of Asia Pacific time zone. Today we've got speakers from the UK and from Europe and the US. So these time slots work pretty well for us, but I get it's 1 AM if you're in Australia. We will be publishing all of the videos on the Spectrum Scale User Group website after the events have taken place. We'll put the slides on there. Just some information. So there's a Q&A box in WebEx, so you can ask questions in there. Please feel free to ask them during the presentation today. So myself or Christy or Bob will be able to answer some of those questions. We also have a number of IBM people who can respond to those questions as well. So when you ask a question, it will be visible to everybody else once we've answered it. So please feel free to answer in there. We can also stop the presenter and say, oh, hang on a minute, we'd just like to ask this question from the one of the audience as well. So please do feel free to ask questions in there and we'll make sure that they get answered. The plan there is also to take the questions and to put those on the website at the end of it. So the list of events, they're going to be every couple of weeks, depending on when we can get speakers. We will be taking a break over August, and we do expect to come back in the last week in August, early September, with some more talks in this series. So we're kind of interested in kind of feedback from these events. So please do post on the mailing list or in the Slack channel to let us know what you've found useful in these WebEx events. If there's topics you'd like us to look for speakers for in the future as well, please. So I'm going to hand over to Amy, who's the development director from IBM, just to say a couple of words to welcome everyone as well.
All right, very good, Simon. Thank you for the introduction, and I want to welcome everybody today to our Spectrum Scale User Group digital meeting. And as Simon mentioned, the Q&A is really important, and we want to make sure that we hear from you and bring speakers and topics in here that are the most useful. We are doing a lot of exciting work with Spectrum Scale and ESS. We've just released our 5.0.5 extended user support version on May 22nd. We'll be talking about what's new in that release. We've got, of course, our next release for 5.1 coming out later in the year. And in our ESS line, we've got the ESS 5000, which is the refresh of our capacity offering coming out in August. So we've got a lot of exciting things coming for 2020 within the Scale and ESS line, right? Additionally, one of the topics we've been discussing in user groups over the past couple of years has been what is Scale doing for more containerized workloads and Scale running with containers, Scale itself being containerized. We're doing a lot of work in this space as well, not just the release of the container storage interface driver, which we had version 1.0 of that earlier, and actually at the end of 2019, but we've done subsequent releases on that, and we'll continue to make improvements to that driver. We've got more coming out in June. But our cloud native deployments of Spectrum Scale and what we're doing with our storage engagement in the storage suite for Cloud Paks offering as well. So we've got a lot going on in the area of containerization and being more cloud native, cloud ready and working for those types of environments, public, private, and hybrid. So, make sure that you get some information on those workloads and those types of environments as well. So, again, it's important that we hear from you on the topics that you want. Certainly the roadmap, what we're doing with support. We always have members of our support team available as well. Our BD&A offerings, what we're doing with Cloudera is important to hear about as well. Lots of exciting things going on. Now is a great time to be a Scale user and to be participating in the user group. So thank you all very much for your time and attention. I'm going to turn this back over, and I look forward to a productive session today and as our series continues.
Thank you, Amy. This is Chris Maestas. Some of you have sort of heard me sort of talk about what's new in Spectrum Scale in previous kind of user meetings. And again, we kind of are adapting in the new area of things that's going on. We have, again, what's new in Spectrum Scale 5.0.5 today to sort of talk about in this series. We actually have some co-speakers and good friends of mine as well, right? Matthias and Ismael will sort of be helping to present some of the content that we have today in sort of talking about what we have in this exciting release of Spectrum Scale 5.0.5. As always, if you have questions, if you go ahead and post them in the pane, and we'll be happy to answer them and get interrupted, and is not a problem. So, we always have the various kinds of legal slides that are out there. This time, I promise, there's only one that we had to insert, so not the three. I think we're getting a little smarter about how much legalese we sort of do. But here's a standard disclaimer, right? We are sort of making various statements that are being made. There are and all the various kind of legalese here. So there is the standard disclaimer. Also, in addition, like I said, if you haven't participated in any of the beta programs or alpha programs or early ship programs, early support programs, ESPs, I highly encourage you. You can always work with your partner or IBM contact to participate and be nominated. So we've done this for our ESS systems. We've done this for Spectrum Scale. A new feature of Spectrum Scale coming out, we do this as well. So again, I always kind of encourage this program. It's a very healthy program right now. Sometimes we have so many nominations, we don't know what to do with some of the projects that are going on. So it's a very exciting kind of environment. As well as we have a Spectrum Scale Developer Edition. If you haven't heard, again, it's 12 terabytes of storage based on Data Management Edition. It's available for our try and buy page, free for non-production use. And I love it. If you have to ask, it's probably not permitted. Again, this is non-production kind of data. No formal support around this as well. And some people actually ask as well, is like, what are you doing with Spectrum Scale in regards to open source kind of things as well, right? So the GitHub repository that we have is there. So we have various projects that are going on around there. You can see Amy mentioned our CSI driver. We actually have the code for the CSI driver on GitHub, right? And other projects, you can see Erasure Code Edition projects that we've sort of done. We've kind of mentioned from time to time NSDPerf, right? We've open sourced that. That's actually in our network readiness framework. And some of the things that we mentioned in our previous user groups that Wayne and PC, have talked about with regards to new installation infrastructure, and Ted as well. So you can see some of the projects that are going on there. I just want to point that out, github.com, IBM, Spectrum Scale Tools, that's kind of our top level environment. And then the other thing is this was another plug, right? A lot of people say, like, where do I get information? What about, this version of Red Hat, this kernel of Red Hat? Check out the FAQ, right? I mean, it's an HTML, it's a PDF. You can download it, search it, right? I find myself for a lot of the questions I get. I mean, we're doing a good job of updating it. I know people complain it might be a little too long, but we are sort of making sure it is updated regularly. Maybe we'll work on sectioning it off, but it's a very good resource. Like I said, I would say most of the time the questions that are being asked are in the FAQ or the Knowledge Center. So, I highly encourage you to sort of have that PDF that you have saved, do a search through that first for any of your questions. So, okay, so kind of today's topic in Scale 505 is talking about this extended update support. This is a release that we're sort of talking about. We're going to talk about feature updates that, again, around core, around monitoring availability and proactive services, give you an update on some protocols, and then security. Finally, we'll close it out again to sort of people sort of ask what changed, what command lines changed, what's very stuff. We're doing a better job of trying to let you know of the changes in the command lines, what's being deprecated, and what are we phasing out, right? So we're trying to sort of have that message in the actual software. So here we are. The news about Spectrum Scale 505, right? From a licensing perspective, it's an extended update support release. And really what we're trying to do is simplify the ownership of Spectrum Scale, right? We, sort of take a look at the way 4.2.3 was handled. It kind of was EOS-like in a lot of things, right? We've sort of been releasing PTS for it still, even with Red Hat 7.8, right? We sort of, actually got a PTF out there for that to support that. So we've been supporting this release for a long time, but it wasn't until we announced end of service, right? EOS. I truly tried to go through to make sure any of the IBM acronyms were kind of spelled out here as well. So, catch me if I missed anything. Nobody really knew until we announced EOS, right, for 4.2.3, how long it was going to last. So for version 505, essentially, it's an extended update support release officially. So what does that mean? You can remain on current and get security fixes or other fixes without the expense of something new, a new feature that may introduce some change in the behavior of the code, right? So we have a kind of a stable stream that's going on that we're putting security fixes, other fixes into the environment. You can take advantage of versions and releases while skipping mod packs. We'll talk a little bit about that. This versions, releases, mods. Some of you know the PTFs. You'll even know before ZA how long to expect support and plan accordingly, right? So again, we're trying to give you comfort in how the release is going to be supported, how actually that nomenclature works. And here at IBM, again, we have this, acronyms. We have release nomenclature, right? A version number, a release number, right? So, 5.0 is, a version and a release. Amy kind of mentioned there's a 5.1 that may come out, right? That's another version and release. 4.2, right, is actually a version and release. 4.2.3 is a mod level, right? So 4.2.3 that's actually going on. And you see here now 505, that's what we're talking about, right? So what does it sort of mean here is, having OS updates, what we usually have been doing on these mod levels is we have, twice a year we've been having, talks about what's new in Spectrum Scale. That's usually what we're going to hear, right? The new mod level comes out, some new functionality is going to come out around that. We'll give you some insight in a talk very similar to this, right? So we'll imagine trying to do this, in the fall time frame, probably about the next mod level that's coming out. Then you have fixed packs, right, or PTFs, as sort of. So here's where your security fixes, functional fixes, cumulative, not really any new functionality here, but we're just sort of working on the functional and the security aspect of what's going on in Spectrum Scale. So try to understand that nomenclature really helps because, again, if you think of that, version and release, right, how long is it supported, right? What's the life cycle of that? So, 5.0 versus, 4.2, right? Essentially, anytime we change any of these numbers, that kind of resets the support life cycle in the past, right? So when we actually end a service for a particular version, right, IBM may, and note the word may, offer extended support for up to 2 years, right? That doesn't include PTF. So, after end of service, you may get extended support for the software, right? And again, note the word may, that's out there. So Spectrum Scale is, again, typically released. A new version is, or releases every 3 to 5 years. And again, new mod levels, again, every 6 months. So twice a year, you're sort of seeing a new version of Spectrum Scale. PTFs are usually within, 6 to 8 weeks and what's going on there. And again, what is supported? All the mod levels of a currently active release will remain supported. So you call IBM for help. We're going to give you a hand with anything there. And PTFs are only for the most current mod level, right? So, it's going to be important later to sort of see, 423 and 505 essentially is what we're providing PTFs for, right? So currently those are our two supported mod levels. So you sort of said, what is this going to do for you? I mentioned it's going to simplify ownership, right? So, you're going to be able to receive fixes without having to take on new features. This is very similar to what we've seen in the Linux community with their distributions for Red Hat and others. It maybe call it a long-term support release or LTS from other distributions as well, like Ubuntu. You're going to get security fixes. Other fixes are there. Eliminates the need for extensive retesting so we can, stay secure, and allows for, again, better dependency and management of, the ISV-like applications you're doing. So it gives you we really were trying to align to, for example, what Red Hat was doing. Again, Ubuntu was doing it with LTS releases, and have a stable kind of stream of extended update support. And that's just an example, right, of what Red Hat, would be doing with Red Hat 8, right? They're at liberty to change how they want to do, but that's essentially, you have the release, you have extended update support, and then, possibly extended support off of that. So how does this look with Spectrum Scale, you're going to ask, right? So you see 423 is down there on the bottom, right? And right now in the service, is this fall or early fall, right? That's going on right now. September, right, is kind of what we're targeting. You see the purple line, extended support, right, may be offered, no PTFs, so that's kind of what you're sort of seeing. But 505, again, is the EUS release right now. So we just released it, so PTFs are ongoing. We have, extended update support release with PTFs, again, for a period pretty much, if you look at right now, till probably second quarter of, just between, second quarter of the 2022, right? So essentially, I think that's kind of trying to read the math here, right, in the months. So you can kind of see how that's going. You can see that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to add new functionality to Spectrum Scale. So, we may have another version. We are going to have another version that has new features, new functionality, but that's going to be a different code stream, right? So you're sort of seeing an extended update support release. You can have that long durability of maintenance for security, functionality fixes. We can now introduce a new functionality, new features that we want to do, bring that into another release, and sort of have these cadences where, every now and then you'll be able to jump from one extended update support release to another. Does that mean that's the only way you can operate? No. I mean, in the way I sort of operate, I mean, if I'm using Ubuntu, for example, I'm always going to maybe play around with the latest and greatest and maybe get burned and go back to an LTS release, right? So the extended update support release gives you that reliability. It's just going to work. You don't have to worry about it, but you can still, cadence with the other releases that are coming out and get to work with the new features and functionality.
So, Chris, can I ask a quick question on this? Is there a cost
Sure.
to extended update support or extended support, that no PTF thing? Is that an additional cost, or is that just in your existing license maintenance agreement?
So I believe that we are, so for the purple, the extended support that you sort of see, that's additional cost. But what I believe, and Carl is on the line as well, and quickly jump in if I say the wrong thing, the extended update support release is, again, part of the standard stream of support in what you pay IBM for.
Yep, that's correct, Chris. Extended update support is part of your standard SNS, as we want to encourage people to take advantage of it. We think it's in everybody's interests, so I think we'd be foolish to charge for it. When you get to the purple part, that's support that's provided by the TSS organization, not by Scale Development itself, and they are going to charge for that. It's a custom quote, and if anybody needs to know how to get a quote, just ping me either directly if you have my email address or via the user group mailing list.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Chris.
And that is different, by the way, from the way most other companies, even Red Hat, are operating, where extended update support is a separately chargeable item.
Yes, we recently, I recently learned that as well. So yeah, so there is no charge. Thank you, Carl, for the extended update support that you have here. Right. To just kind of quickly give you, not to go through all the Linux distributions, like I said, and Carl's done this in the past, but this is just kind of giving you an alignment for Red Hat Enterprise Linux and what Scale 505 is doing, what you sort of are kind of planning for in timelines, right? 7.8 just came out, right? And we worked really hard to make sure that, our EOS-like and our EOS releases, we're going to be able to support that as well. Outstanding work by the development team in making that actually happen and close the gap to get that testing done. But again, you see 505 is supported through a good amount of Red Hat releases, and you can sort of update your Red Hat release, stay on 505, and have a good kind of transition period when you actually need to update to the next extended update support release. So we're trying to again be cognizant. We're really trying to avoid the problem where I can't make no promises. Remember that disclaimer side, where we actually we do something in release and then we force you to do an OS update, right? That was something that was a little painful for some. I know we worked with some of you on that. But here, extended update support release, nice full release for a good amount of Linux distributions, and you can sort of choose when you want to do your upgrades, right? Good. So just an executive summary, you have, again, extended update support release here of 505. Customers can get the PTF stream every 6 months. Like I said, end of service 423 is coming up. And you're sort of seeing this overlap that we're trying to do. You'll see new features, new functionality come out in these other releases, but 505 is really the importance to notice about that. All right. So on to core improvements, monitoring availability and proactive services, maps, protocols, and security. So from a core improvement, right, one of the things we did talk about a little bit in 504, and just kind of mention it, you'll see the big red letters, RPK only, right, was trend support for spectrum scale. And this is not spectrum scale RAID, this is not GNR, this is spectrum scale. So this is the software that we're talking about here and how we're actually doing that. We have a command line, a memory claim space that was introduced, right, to sort of work on that. And what are we doing in the work in this area, right, is being able to change the disk type to be available for space reclamation, auto detection that you might have a disk to do that, and methods to reclaim that. So that's the new features. For any of you that are out there, like I said, trying this with spectrum scale today via RPQ, right? We do have a couple of clients that have done this and sort of working successfully so far on these thinly provisioned volumes, right, that we have in, IBM Storewise, for example, in our storage block devices, but that means, we also work with other kind of environments. So this is core improvements that we're doing. Again, it's still RPQ. We're still kind of fleshing things out as we always do and making sure that things are, ready for the general kind of use. And we have a really good process of qualifying this. So if you want to try this out, again, you can submit an RPQ. Now, Ismail is going to sort of talk a little bit about some of the other core improvements. We'll turn it over to you, Ismail.
Hello, this is Ismail Solis. I'm a data scientist and also performance analyst for the IBM Spectrum Scale. And along with the thin provisioning and claim space capabilities that Chris has just mentioned, I would like to share with you another good functional improvements and also performance improvements that we have achieved in this 505 spectrum scale. So let's start with the OS support. On 505, we are supporting Red Hat 7.8 to 8.1, and in the hand of Windows, starting with 505, Windows servers 2019 nodes can be used as NSD clients, NSD servers in both environments, heterogeneous, where we have Windows and non-Windows nodes, and homogeneous clusters, where we have Windows only nodes. So following the recommendation of Chris at the beginning of this presentation, go to the FAQ page, and there you will find a very well-structured table that will tell you the compatibilities between spectrum scale versions and the operating system versions. Another important enhance that we have added to this 5.5 is now it is possible to copy files in a spectrum scale file system to another without losing any IBM spectrum scale extended attributes. This was not possible in previous versions or releases of IBM spectrum scale, so this is a very nice addition in 5.5. So also POSIX and NFS version 4 ACLs are also copied. So this for sure will make easier the file management for you as customers. In the side of install and upgrade toolkit, we also have some interesting improvements. So for now, we have a better handling for short FQDN host names during the install and upgrade. Both FQDN and short names are supported in the etc host. This will make easier and even more transparent the process of installation using the toolkit. In the case of EC, we are able, using the install upgrade toolkit, to roll upgrade from 5.04.3, 5.04.4 to 5.05. So not only core ESS, but also EC can be upgraded using the install toolkit. In the side of C systems, we have important additions. Now we have sys with NFS. We have to have in mind that these improvements are RPQ only supported. So now on these systems, it's possible to have sys clustered NFS, sys SMB. There are also improvements in the sys GUIs, health checking, performance monitor, as well as introducing authentication setup using the user auth command. We also have important performance improvements. So we have enhanced some of the commands that we already have available in Spectrum Scale. Some of these commands are the change config and also the change attribute. In the side of change config, we have added two attributes, the mean indirect block desks and also the mask received threads. The first one helps us to set the number of catch indirect block descriptors. So this number was previously the same of the max files to catch. So now with this addition, this attribute allows us to set more block indirect descriptions in catch, improving the performance in some types of applications, particularly in some of these applications that do direct I/O in very large files, or direct I/O in files that have an indirection level greater than 0, even if the file is not that big. In the case of the parameter max receiver threads, also an addition to a change config command, it allows us to increase the number of threads that that handle the incoming TCP packages. So we can set up this number of threads to logical number of CPUs on the node. So this will help us to improve the performance by reducing the number of sockets that each of the receiver threads must handle. These parameters will be very helpful and should be increased on large clusters where we actually want to reduce this number of sockets that each of the threads are handling. In relation to the modifications to change attribute for the option compact, we have two supports. The first one is indirect blocks, and the second one is the fragment. These two options increase the available disk space by recovering unused indirect blocks that were truncated to 0 length. This is the case of indirect blocks. In the case of fragment, it reduced the number of logical blocks from files to the actual number of subblocks that are actually required. These two additions are very useful in file systems with very large numbers of files.
So can I just pause a second? There's a couple of questions come in on the Q&A. So the first one was about thin provisioning support and whether or not there's been any test cycles with other vendors. Do you know if that's going on?
Just Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, this is Carl. Yeah, we have had 1 or 2 requests for that, and we have started doing that where we can. So, you know, it's still by RPQ because we need to look at each individual one and see exactly how they do thin provisioning and whether Scale could safely tell when the device is running out of physical storage, which is what we really care about. But if you have one that you would like to use, you know, send us an RPQ or score request, and we'll certainly take a look at it.
So thanks. There was a question about support of compression. So does the support of compression mean that you will also support the FCM modules in ESS 3000 or in other flash systems?
Yes to the flash systems with the same cautions about never run out of physical space. ESS 3000, I'm not sure about Amy. Do you know the answer?
No. So it's not going to be supported in ESS 3000, but the follow-on to that, so it's on the roadmap to support FCM2s specifically in a future ESS 3000 follow-on.
Correct. Exactly. It will not be in this first round, but you know, pay attention to the roadmap and look a little further down the road, and it will be part of the ESS line in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks. Then there was a question if there was any estimates on performance differences between 423 and 505. And I get that's a difficult question to answer, maybe.
I can certainly tell you that relative to the work that we did, say, for example, for the Coral systems, there's a lot of work that we've done to improve the performance of the 5.0 code stream relative to, say, some of the 4.2 .3 features, right? So, you know, the things like MD test and sequential IOR and random IOR and so forth, you know, those numbers and performance characteristics are better on the 5.0 code stream than on the 4.2, and a lot of that is enabled because of the work that was done for the Coral systems.
Yeah, we did actually publish some data around about when we launched 5.0.0, and I think the probable presentations containing some of their archived on the user group's website from the user group meetings where the data was presented. So
exactly,
there have been incremental increases since then, obviously, but that was the big jump was from 423 to 5.0.0. Sorry, Keith, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're absolutely correct. So performance is not a monolithic thing. You can talk about latency, you can talk about throughput, you can talk about metadata performance, and in every release, there's incremental improvements. And as we do these kinds of presentations, we mention them, but as Carl correctly pointed out, we made a significant jump in performance when we moved from 423 to 5.0.x stream of releases, and there are presentations to the past user group meetings where this was detailed across the board, also for protocol supports as well. We showed some performance improvements, and so these are all should be able to be found in the archived presentations and talks. It's hard to give you a number, but a good one I try to use metadata performance. We have 10x improvement going from 423 to 5.0 because that was required contractually, as well as we doubled the performance in terms of throughput per client. So that those are just two anecdotal numbers that might be useful.
Thanks. I'll let you carry on.
All right, thanks. Go ahead.
There was a build-up of questions, and I thought we'd just stop and get some answers.
Yes.
No, appreciate the interruption. Yeah.
Thank you. There are other two comments that has been improved. One is the MN check quota, and the second one is the MN restrict. Both has been improved in terms of performance. For the MN check quota command, that counts the inode and space usage for a file system, and finally writes the collected data into quota files. The spectrum scale 505 fixes some slowdowns that we have been observed while traversing very large space in inode 0 files, and also have improved the performance for file systems with several independent file sets. In the case of restrict file system performance, the command moves existing files on disk in a file system, based in some change that the disk state made by some other spectrum scale commands, such as change disk, add disk, or del disk. Well, in 5.05, we have improved the cell tuning of the number of the threads for doing this movement of data. So the only thing that we need to have in mind is that this enhancement is only for ESS. Another important improvement in performance, and this has been very significant, has to speed the directory listing in directories with a lot of file set junctions. So we have enhanced the algorithm for file set lookup to significantly improve the performance of directory listing. Other important performance improvements include that we have eliminated the zero link count inodes in snapshots. For sure, this will significantly the performance when we are handling snapshots. For example, avoiding moving unnecessary blocks when a snapshot is deleted. We have added a configuration option to establish all-to-all daemon connections after the actual file system daemon starts. This will help us to improve the performance of creating new files in newly created directories by reducing the overhead of shifting the time of when we are doing the actual connection of the file system daemon with the other daemons that actually execute the file creation. So this is doubling basically the performance that we are observing when we are creating files in newly created directories. And finally, on my side, I think we have also improved the performance of map read workloads when multiple threads read the same file. So now we are observing a much better performance in comparison to previous versions of spectrum scale in this method. Next slide, please. I think I am handing it to Matthias.
Okay, yeah, so this is Matthias Dietz. I'm a Spectrum Scale RAS architect, and I'm going to take you through the monitoring improvements and RAS improvements of 5.05. So let's talk about the health monitoring first. So we added additional detection mechanisms to find out if nodes run into memory issues, especially if the out-of-memory killer of the Linux operating system starts to kick in. It can, kill certain processes which leave the unfunctional systems behind. And for this reason, we now detect those out-of-memory killer runs, find out if they have killed maybe some spectrum scale processes, and warn about that in Health and in the GUI. There's also a new command which can be used to resolve such an out-of-memory event. So if you have inspected your system and find out that the out-of-memory killer did nothing harmful, then you can just reset the event. However, in most cases, it's recommended to reboot the node if that happens. Another problem we detect is about NUMA memory interleave. That's an option you can set in the spectrum scale configuration. And we have seen cases where customers have enabled that option in the field, but the required dependencies on the system were missing. So in fact, if these dependencies are missing, for example, the command like NUMA-CTL is required to enable NUMA memory interleave. If that command was missing, then Spectrum Scale could not enable the interleaving, and there was a fallback to the non-interleaved mode. But there was no clear warning about that. So now that also shows up as an event with some user action and described procedure how to fix that. Then several improvements to the protocol stack monitoring have been done as well. For NFS, there was a so-called RPC null check, which monitors if the NFS server is still responding to RPCs. Now, there have been cases where the NFS server could be overloaded and RPC null check timed out. And in the past, we triggered failovers immediately, which sometimes caused, unnecessary failovers because we failed over too quickly. And meanwhile, with 505, if such a null check fails, we will first double check if the NFS server is still serving IOs by looking at the NFS IO stats, and only if NFS server is not doing anything, a failover will be triggered. Another improvement to the NFS is when you use CES to export an existing spectrum scale file system or even a remote spectrum scale file system from another spectrum scale cluster through NFS, then there have been cases where the NFS stack came up before the file system was available. So now we put in some means to monitor that the file system is probably mounted before NFS starts up and before IP addresses are assigned, to avoid conditions where NFS clients, could not access the file system because it was not mounted yet. Let's jump to the next slide. Performance monitoring. We have put in a new sensor in our performance monitoring tools, which is now capturing the top 10 processes of a particular system. That helps a lot with debugging and finding problems and finding reasons for overload. So you can use a new command called mmperformon_report to really query which processes have taken the highest amount of CPU at a particular time frame. And with that, you can understand why your system might be overloaded or slower at a given time. Yeah. Improved network sensor for Docker. We had cases in the field where Docker or customers were using Docker on the Spectrum Scale system, and Docker is creating some virtual network interfaces. And these virtual network interfaces get recreated and they are basically temporary. And now with these temporary interface names, this really messed up the performance monitoring database. And so with this change now, you are able to specify some filters that this does not happen anymore. And with that, the database is not growing anymore. So this helps with these conditions. And last but not least, performance thresholds improvements. We added new measurements and metrics to the performance data. In this case, memory available percent. And this available percent can be used to put your own threshold on it and define your own limits when you want to get warned about certain memory usage of the system. And last but not least, default threshold rules are deactivated if a sensor is not configured. So we have some default threshold rules like detecting if SMB or some quotas are hit, or if some SMB limits are exceeded. And now we detect if the sensors, for example, for SMB are not even enabled, then the thresholds will be disabled as well, which obviously takes some or saves some CPU cycles. Let's jump to the next page. Call home. We are continue to invest and improve call home and the so-called proactive services. So everything we do with the call home data. So one improvement to call home to make it more valuable is call home is now able to show you a diff between your configurations of two selected call home uploads. This means if you have call home enabled, then and you have it enabled, for example, with a daily upload, then you can use the call home command to show you a diff between two of your call home uploads, let's say today and last week. And by this, you can find out what configuration has been changed by today and last week. And that can help you to better understand why a certain problem now shows up since last week, or why you run into performance problems. Maybe something has been changed. So with this command, it's now very easy to see what has changed on your system. Another minor change was to enforce in the call home configuration, enforce options like customer name and customer ID to make sure that the call home data we receive from the customers can be assigned to the right customers on our side in any case. And we can use that information in the future to make sure that the call home data is always linked to the right customers and to the right tickets in our Salesforce database, for example. And there have been more improvements to call home to remove some of the limitations. For example, call home was not supported together with pseudo wrappers, but that is now supported. You can now modify call home groups by adding and deleting nodes from a group, and also test the connection of any node in the cluster. Next slide, please. Yes, there have been also some improvements to the GUI, and one new panel has been added for watch folders. So if you are using watch folders, you will now see a list of the configured watches of your system for a given file system, and also what kind of events are enabled for those watches. Then there's a new display or a new panel showing NVMe devices. So if your system uses NVMe for the physical disk, like it's used in an ESS 3000, then you will see additional NVMe status information in the GUI. And as a last point, the GUI now allows to configure overlapping ID ranges. So if you use protocols and you use Active Directory together with RFC 2307, where your IDs are stored in Active Directory, then in the past it was not possible to configure overlapping ranges for different Active Directory domains. This limitation has been removed on the protocol stack already in earlier releases, and now it's even possible in the GUI to configure these overlapping ID ranges, which makes it much easier to do that. All right, I think that's all from my side. Let's jump to the next slide and give back to Chris.
Thanks, Matthias. Do we have any questions in the queue, Simon?
We don't have any that are unanswered, I don't think, at the moment, though.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so the next section is to really talk about protocols in Spectrum Scale, right? You know, the standard, right, SMB, right? You'll see I've highlighted in purple, right? We actually have right now a very good best practices guide for SMB, right? If you're using SMB with lots of files in a directory, what kind of actions can you sort of take, or kind of know some of the limitations? So we have some best practices that have been documented within 505 in the Knowledge Center, essentially from a recovery lock standpoint, being able to do the SMB clustering, use a global lock other than, to maintain cluster integrity. And then for Mac clients, right, when we were returning the inode, we used to sort of return a 0. We're actually returning the actual inode number when you're sort of doing that as well. And some continued fine-tuning and error messages and troubleshooting procedures, again, for SMB when I'm doing sharing, right? I'm having that data exported out of SMB, but also accessing it differently as well. You can see the table here on the bottom right. I mean, we're the left-hand side, the various scale releases, and we sort of try to do, let everyone know where we're at in our version of SMB support. We use Samba here and sort of working in the various, platforms that are tested. So right now we're on 4.1.1 of that. But the big news, like I said, that I really like to highlight is we have a really good best practices guide now for how SMB is used in Spectrum Scale.
So Chris, there's a question about SMB protocols. Is there plans to support SMB transparent failover? I wonder if that means transparent kind of upgrade failover.
Yeah, that's a fun word, fun topics in the Samba community. I encourage anyone to take a look at some of the Samba talks that are going on out there I know Australia, they run a big user group around that. So I know IBM is involved at that from some level. We've, not the Spectrum Scale team, but just IBM in general from Samba. So I would encourage folks to sort of take a look at that. If you look at what we do in Scale today, right, for these protocols of SMB and NFS and CSI is an open source kind of driver as well. We're using Samba, so trying to leverage the functionality that's in there, right? So as this functionality is introduced into the Samba kind of framework, that's when we can start thinking about introducing it into how Spectrum Scale will take advantage of it. And there's been features in Samba today that people have wanted to take advantage on Spectrum Scale outside of what we support. And I'm not saying, that I can condone that behavior, but you can, sort of do that. But the Spectrum Scale team, led by Ingo, basically does a really good job on making sure the various functionalities as they come into Samba, we qualify them, have the MMSMB command sort of work with the configuration option, introduce that. So, yeah, and I know it was a kind of roundabout way in answering that question because there's a lot of work that's still going on in the Samba community for that type of failover to occur. Right. NFS, again, we use NFS-Ganesha, right? Another, we kind of still do support CNFS, right? The clustered NFS as well. It's not sort of taken out, but that's a kernel-based kind of NFS. Ganesha, again, is a user-space NFS kind of environment. We have introduced, again, a while back, a couple of releases now, the Ganesha stats command. What is it doing for us now is allowing us to track client operations, right, for reads, for writes, via different kinds of protocols that are out there, right, V3, V4 as well. So right now, we've kind of extending this, tool, Ganesha Stats, to bring in more things to sort of monitor from a client perspective. That's really the big news here is kind of, understanding what the clients are doing, connecting to the Ganesha server that's running on your Cluster Expert Services nodes that you have running. Matthias already mentioned some of the other NFS features, right, in sort of startup and sort of monitoring, right? Actually making sure that doesn't happen as well. There's a monitoring aspect, but, fail appropriately as well within when something is not there and start successfully when you actually, have the balance that's there. Other improvements around metadata caching, right, or, doing large directory lists within NFS. Ganesha has been there. And like I said, this is another, like I said, with SMB, where we're using Samba. NFS-Ganesha, right, is an open source kind of project as well. Coincidentally, you kind of take a look over the fence, Red Hat is using this as well, right? So we have some really good, work that's, we take advantage of each other's kind of work that's going on in these spaces.
So Chris, there's a question around NFS 4.1 support. Is that going to be supported? Is it supported?
That there is forthcoming support that is coming. There is support that's coming for that right now. I know in the mailing list, somebody actually divulged how you can enable it, but it's, again, not officially supported. But yeah, the plan is to work on having full support for that, I believe, in the fall release. But I'll quickly be corrected if I say something by Carl and Amy.
No, that is correct. So I think Renar asked that question, and the answer is correct that we are planning on getting 4.1 supported by the fall release this year.
And as always, plans are not commitments. Everything is subject to change until it changes. Yes, that's the intent.
Okay. Also from protocols, again, containers, CSI, this driver, again, it's on GitHub. We're publishing changes to there. CSI 1.1, that code has been released. We're working on the next version that's coming out, right? So you'll see that push out to the GitHub repo as well. OpenShift 4.4 just came out, so we're sort of looking into that as well and how that's going to work. The upgrades to this, sidecar images that you have for provisioning, registering the nodes, and improvements in how we're collecting debug data within CSI. So we're continuing to make strides there. And again, you can always look at where we're actually making these changes in our GitHub repo. HDFS transparency, I'm actually really excited about some of the work that went on here, right, where we actually are taking the name node service and now letting you run that on our cluster within the CES kind of stack, right? So cluster export services, those protocol stacks can run the name node service within there and sort of have that, high availability of what CES is doing inside there as well. So you're sort of seeing that now, as well as, continued, checking on the open source Hadoop distributions and, Red Hat and Linux operating systems, being able also when you're collecting snaps and you have the transparency connector running, being able to collect the logs as well. And I believe we actually had a good developer works article that was written on, how this actually works, the best practices, the setup. But this is really exciting news, and I like the work that we're doing here as well. But I know that someone's probably going to ask this next question, right? How about Cloudera and what is Spectrum Scale sort of doing as well, right? So, we're working on something, right? There's an event that just occurred this last week or the end of last week. There's a, IBM.com Analytics Partners Cloudera where we sort of had some statement of directions and what's sort of going on. There's an upcoming webinar where our offering management team is going to be talking as well within, the Hadoop environment. If you don't like my tiny URL that I actually have, just feel free to search, meeting the new intelligent data economy head on from Cloudera, and it'll point you to the same long URL that it's out there. But there's an upcoming webinar on the 25th to sort of talk about this as well. But like I said, we're working on something. Again, statement of direction is to ensure that, Spectrum Scale transparency layer is working with Cloudera distributions as well. Active file management. So we sort of talked previously about having dependent file sets within an AFM or an AFM-DR file set. That's something we sort of had going on in the last release. Some new kind of enhancements I just sort of wanted to highlight that as well. But another enhancement I liked was enabling you to increase the number of threads for prefetch operations, right? So you can actually increase how many threads you want to sort of run on that prefetch kind of environment, whether it's prefetching files or metadata in the AFM kind of mindset. And then there's enhancements for AFM data migration, only read the directory once or refresh once when you're thinking about, when you're using AFM to improve performance for data migration procedures. Because I believe it was in one of the user groups that we had last year, right? We were talking about, migration kind of strategies and what we're doing, right? And AFM, is sort of helping to do a lot with migration from file system, X to, file system Y. Essentially, you're seeing the work that we're putting in AFM here today with some of these parameters as well, and then as well as this, fast create for AFM and AFM-DR as well. And making sure that, you reduce the number of operations. The classic kind of use case is I have a tar file or, a zip file that has tons of little files or thousands of files, and you sort of, take the Linux kernel source tree, right? It's always fun to see all the operations that are occurring within an AFM file set, and you sort of do that. But essentially, fast create is helping to alleviate the number of operations that we're doing, so you're not having to send a lot of these, RPCs back and forth from the AFM cache file set and home back and forth. So that's also there. From a security standpoint, also looking at TLS 1.3 support for the Spectrum Scale GUI and the REST API. The REST API is coincidentally what the CSI, the Container Storage Interface driver, uses. And then from encryption, being able to support IBM's new SKLM 4.0 as a server. as well as qualification of the fails or, more metric, their next version of their server as well. And then being able to renew expired client certificates without recreating a new client, right? So you would have a client certificate and you'd have to just start a whole new client to have a new client certificate going. Finally, in terms of the software, right, making sure we're doing RPM packets, signing and support for installation and upgrades. And then we've talked about this in the past. SE Linux, running in permissive mode, was something, I would always encourage folks to at least run that. Don't just turn it off. But having it be able to run in enforcing mode and be fully supported, right? We used to have some caveats that were documented with some of the exchanges previously, but now having that be, in full enforcing mode with SE Linux with, again, what we've done in our knowledge center to document that and have that be supported. From our file audit logging and watch folders, and again, I'll take a page of what we've done for watch folders in the past, right? Essentially, with watch folders, we're allowing you to send to two external Kafka syncs, right? So file audit logging and watch folders are sort of two different things. Watching sort of something in the file system, sending those events to an external Kafka sync for consuming, like Spectrum Discover does, for example, another IBM kind of thing, or another kind of event handler that wants to have a Kafka sync, right? From a file audit logging perspective, being able to do audit logging on a file set level, right? So you can specify a number of file sets to be looking at in your file system to do audit logging on, and you can exclude file sets to be sort of looking at that as well. So really the enhancement here is to be selective in the number of file sets you have for file audit logging features to either be turned on or to exclude from that particular feature. And I think now we're sort of moving into our final kind of part of the talk where we're talking about, what's changed, right? So these are just some of the commands that have changed, right? We're trying to, again, document the summary of changes for each and every command. Try to, the mmwatch folder, right? If you actually wanted to, mmwatch is the command for the -- upgrade. So if you want to sort of have that integrate with system health infrastructure, right? So you sort of see that process. We've talked a little bit about the AFM enhancements for AFM reader once and AFM refresh once. You sort of see some of the other kinds of things we've talked about, prefetch kind of options as well within AFM as well. So you sort of see we're trying to document all of the commands on the left-hand side, what's actually changed as well. This is in our knowledge center in our summary of changes for 505. We're also trying to document what's, going to get deprecated, right? Or what is deprecated, right? Essentially not going to get, what is deprecated. And again, sort of seeing the use of TLS 1.0 and 1.1 for authorization against the GUI and REST API. Please upgrade to 1.2. So again, that's basically your first two rows. From a cloud perspective, again, CSI is it, right? We're past 1.0, we're on 1.1 right now. We've got a good cadence of the driver versions coming out. So in the past, we used to have Ubiquity, the storage enabler for containers, that we had out there. That's being deprecated. So we're encouraging everyone to adopt the CSI driver here. From a platform perspective, again, the Power 7 encryption library, again, we're sort of, trying to not worry about that anymore with Power 8. Power 9 is actually here as well. So platform support for Power 7, right? Plan to migrate to newer generations of the Power systems. And then discontinued, like I said, IBM, I guess I've been around now long enough that I even to see the big insights distribution IBM had, right? We actually included GPFS FPO at the time, right, in doing that. So that transparency layer, the HDFS transparency layer that we have, that's actually working really, really well right now. Really not going to support IBM Big Insights anymore. IBM Big Insights has sort of been phased out anyways. And then from a platform perspective, again, hopefully you're not still running Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008. Upgrade to newer versions of Windows, as Ismail sort of called out already. We do have support for Windows Server 2019 in the latest 505 as well. And I think that kind of brings us to, what we're doing. There was talk in the past, this is more probably for the chairs, right? I mean, having RFE kind of talks, I encourage you to log RFEs, right? It doesn't help if me as an IBMer logs anything or any of the developers log anything as an IBMer, right? Carl's going to basically say, yeah, next. Essentially, you as a client, you as a user, right? Use the RFE process, from to log your RFE. It could be private, it could be public. And I know, like I said, I encourage you to sort of vote on them as well as clients. This does help us. I mean, we do read them, we do look at them, and have to do prioritization based on this. With that, I mean, we sort of want to bring this to a close. I want to, thank you all for attending today's first Spectrum Scale Digital User Group kind of presentation on 5.0.5. As always, please provide feedback if you wish. And I'm going to turn it over to the chairs to sort of close out the call.
Thanks, Chris. Just to say, thanks to all of our speakers today for speaking and you for all turning up and asking questions. I'd also like to thank Ulf and Ted, who've spent a lot of time with us in the last few weeks, actually getting this up and running so we can run this. The next one we have is on the 13th of July, which is on best practices for stretch clusters. I know Lindsay was on the call. Do you want to do a quick pitch? 10 seconds?
Sure. Yeah, so the stretch cluster architecture is used commonly for high availability or for DR, and it's basically leveraging the failure group capability of Spectrum Scale. We're seeing it used quite a bit. So this will be covering some of the practices that we've found helpful, some of the pitfalls you need to avoid and how to avoid those. And looking forward to you coming.
Thanks. So Christy just remind me as well to mention that we are recording all of these talks, so we'll publish that on Spectrum Scale User Group website. It might be kind of next week before we actually get it kind of out of WebEx and uploaded into something where we can make it publicly available. I can see there's one last question been asked in there. Given the recent string of CVE alerts related to the use of set UID bits on certain commands, are there any plans to revisit this mechanism of the TS commands?
So I'm going to call for PC or Wayne to maybe give some direction there.
So there is a very much a highlighted focus on security, and Wayne has actually tasked us to take a more holistic approach at it. We are doing secure by design practices. We are doing threat modeling. And as part of this, right, we will definitely take a look at it. So nothing concrete that we can discuss yet, but yes, security as Spectrum Scale gets adopted in heavily regulated and enterprise use cases, it's becoming more and more of a differentiator for us and has caused us to focus more on it. And as part of that, right, we will take a look at this.
Is security a topic you would like us to present, spend an hour on? The improvements in security?
I think from other people can't really comment on this. I think from my side, it's certainly something we'd be interested in having definitely in one of the later talks in the series. I think that'd be good if we can get that lined up, Wayne.
I think that would be great because that would help us focus as well. There's lots of improvements, as PC said, security and privacy by design. So I think let's set one up for that.
So Ulf will take a note to chase that topic up in the series.
Yeah, that is on the list already.
So thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks again to all of our speakers and the other IBMers who've been on the call as well to contribute to this. So I guess with that, I'll close up the call and so hopefully some of you will return on the 13th of July for the next talk.